with children watching it and what you're saying about kids kind of being left out of the conversation of the culture that Disney's monopolized. It's like, oh, they have to participate in the fear ritual of watching a Disney movie, because how you describe leaving a kid alone in a room as they're watching the parents die or disappear as the kid is separated and then linked to some stranger, that's a fear ritual, that the kid doesn't really realize they're going through. We've watched Disney movies, and like I said, I like Mary Poppins, but even that, it's weird because I would never let my kids go out with a stranger like that. I didn't do a background check on. Those
different
characters
times,
didn't care.
different times.
Different times, yeah. It's weird though. Man, well, I got to look into some of this, the FBI connection, because I had no idea about that in Disney. I think that's fascinating. It sounds even weirder than when Elvis was like deputized by Nixon. It was weird times. But before we let you go, please let everyone know where they can find you. You make awesome comic books. We didn't get a chance to talk about that, but like, tell us about the comic books real quick. I've got the stuff that Sam Tripoli's doing. Sam's been on the show. He's a great guest, great guy.
Our caller canceled, so we can.
Okay, cool. So yeah, well, so we have some time then. So tell us about the comic books, man, because it's amazing.
Well, this dovetails directly with Disney because I've been a conspiracy theorist since I was 12 or 13. I'd argue as soon as I found out about Santa Claus. I won't spoiler alert it, but as soon as I found out about Santa
kids
Claus,
are watching
and
the
it was
show.
like my parents are in on this, my teachers, my grandparents, every single authority
FBI.
figure that I knew for the first 7 or 8 years of my life, they were all in on this massive conspiracy, and it flipped my brain to realize, like, what else are they lying about? That can't be the only thing. Like, the one thing that I find out about was the only lie. So it kind of sent me down this. So anyway, long story is that I end up at Disney. I've already been a conspiracy theorist for well over a decade at this point.
Yep.
And I remember this one day in particular. I can't remember what property we were working on. It might have been Cars. And they had a whole bunch of artists in from Burbank and all over Orlando in this little brainstorming session. And I like looked to my right, and this guy worked on Aladdin. I looked to my left, this guy did some of the main feature animation for Lion King.
Wow.
And I was just like, man, it would be so dope if these guys next to me right now drew me like a cool MK Ultra victim sketch or something, just like something that would combine this Disney world that I'm with into the conspiracy theories that I would like to be working on. I don't want to work on Cars and Goofy. I want to be talking about Sidney Gottlieb and like Adrenochrome, right?
Yeah, Poisoner in Chief.
That one day I was like, at lunch, I was like, hey, to my friend Brian, and I was like, hey man, would you want to just like throw around an idea for a short little story, like maybe a little comic book about these Project Monarch survivors? I had just finished reading like the Franklin cover-up, like very dark stuff, right? Like the Franklin scandal and Lawrence King. And I basically wanted to make a Disney version of that story to sort of present it to someone outside of the Conspiracy of Silence crowd that was already deep into that. I wanted to find like a normie that liked Disney stuff and entice them with Disney level animation and Disney level illustrations, and then be like, wait, what happened to these kids? What's their origin story? Whoa. And that's kind of where Paranoid American even started. It started as me thinking it would be a waste of potential to not have these Disney level animators help convey conspiracy. Now, I found out pretty quickly that not a lot of other people in the office were as into conspiracy theories as I was, and they look into what the Franklin scandal was all about, and then I learned to like maybe not bring that up as much, but it didn't kill the passion for that. So I began my very first comic series was called Time Samplers, and it was made by a lot of the concept art was by a bunch of Disney animators and illustrators that were my coworkers, and that comic series Time Samplers is about 3 kids that escape from Project Monarch facility in Chile called Dignity Colony. That was essentially where they claim a lot of the Nazi rat lines ended up. And that this is where like the Fritz Springmeier Illuminati mind control stuff was going on. Like it had all of those deep assets to it.
I love it.
Again, over time I realized not everyone wants to jump directly into the deep end of like trauma-based mind control. So I've eased back a little bit. Now I'm working on comics about like Bigfoot, the Satanic Panic, the Bavarian Illuminati. The series that I'm doing with Sam Tripoli is called Chaos Twins, and this one is basically the first all ages friendly. Because Sam came to me and he was basically describing, I want to be able to talk about conspiracy theories to parents and to their kids and not get into these like weird fringe topics where it's almost like endangering someone to even mention. Like you don't want to tell a kid about adrenochrome and about Project Monarch,
Right.
but maybe it's cool to tell them about Mothman or Bigfoot or just
Yeah.
the general premise of conspiracy theories and Men in Black as a whole.
Right.
So that's kind of where Chaos Twins birthed out of. And ever since then, man, yeah, every other little topic that I think has too much fear, like there's a lot of adrenochrome fear type stuff. There's a lot of Freemason and Illuminati fear type content out there, but there's not a lot that gives it that Disney treatment. So that still is like the DNA, and everything I do is I try and take like the scariest, the darkest conspiracy theories and then blend it in everything that I learned while I was at Disney for 10 years and try and soften the edges a little bit. And that's kind of the DNA of Paranoid American.
What was it when you were 12 that got you into, other than, was it just Santa, or was there some other event that got your brain going?
It was kind of the ubiquity of X-Files and Men in Black. And one of the things that I mentioned too is if you go back and watch cartoons in the 80s and 90s, there's like this motif where in the background you'd see a little video camera like scanning the playground, right? Or you would see in the background a guy in a black suit and black glasses kind of whispering into his ear.
Yep.
And they would never explain what's going on, but you inherently knew, oh, that's Big Brother, or that's like the eye in the sky that's looking at us. And it was almost like I didn't need to be told to be a conspiracy theorist. I already knew that in every single cartoon and movie that I watched, the same thing with the moon landing, right? And in so many of the movies and cartoons, it's this running joke that the moon landing was all a big like a hoax and a fake.
What?
And this was implanted. Like if you go back
Produced
and
by
watch
Disney.
like Recess,
Yeah.
Recess was a popular.
I remember Recess. Yeah.
So in the Recess movie, there's a few scenes, and the movie itself is about the CIA coming in and taking over this warehouse and yeah, dude. If you go back and watch the actual Recess Disney movie,
No way.
the CIA comes in and they're training like these robots to kind of take over, and the kids break in, and on the billboards in the background of this school that they're in, you can even see like, here's how we faked the moon landing. They don't talk about it. It's just in the background, and and I think that is that like ubiquitous sort of conspiracy that pervaded everything. I mean, this was also, I was raised on like Harry and the Hendersons. I remember growing up and reading the unsolved mystery style books about spontaneous combustion and Atlantis and all of this kind of melded together. And this was also pre 9/11, and it was in this unique point of time that a lot of people missed out on, when being a conspiracy theorist didn't necessarily ascribe you to a political faction. It didn't really say anything else about any of your ideologies, just that you were open to aliens or open to Bigfoot or open to mind control.
Yeah. Oh man, the good old days. You could just be a conspiracy theorist without being attached to some ideology. So since you were into this stuff by around 12, 13, and now we live in a world where it feels like everyone's a conspiracy theorist, what's your take on that?
I feel like a hipster. I feel like I was here before it was cool. Like I was here before 2020 hit. I was here before even 9/11 hit. Like I can kind of like show my credentials too. I can prove I've got like reports from my principal about spreading conspiracy theories in like middle school and stuff. So I don't know. I feel like I've got some of like the badges that I can show off on that.
Yeah.
I also feel that despite having so much more information at our fingertips now, people seem to rely on the headlines more than they ever did, even when there's less of an excuse to. And I think another thing that I've learned recently, mostly doing like podcasts and talking to other people about this, it's not as fun to dig into a conspiracy theory so deep that you start finding the nuance. Usually the fun and the novelty of it is the headline, and it's like, Hillary Clinton is sticking a Capri Sun straw into a baby's head and slurping out, you know, the fountain of youth. Like that part carries such a strong visual, and it's so entertaining that it'll move way farther than saying, well, technically this was found in the early 1930s and it was in dementia precox research. No, by the way, dementia precox might relate to schizophrenia. Like all of that is far more boring than just throwing the rest of it out on the table. And I feel that there's more of that going on. And the other big difference between now and like the 90s or early 2000s is that in the 90s, you would have conspiracy theory documentaries. You'd have Alex Jones documentaries and
Yeah.
Bill Still and Money Masters and
Yep.
Mystery Babylon by William Cooper and Jordan
Yep.
Maxwell and stuff.
100%.
But what changed now is that an Alex Jones documentary, let's not say in 2025, he's on a different trajectory now, but in the mid 2000s or
Yep.
2010s, it was kind of like him as a personality. Like all of a sudden the conspiracy theorist becomes in the limelight, whereas prior to that it was about the things that they were looking into and researching. They were nobody. They were just some random public access dude,
Yeah.
and they couldn't leverage their personality to carry the show. They had to have some kind of salacious research.
Yep.
And that's kind of flip-flopped a little bit. Now all of these conspiracy theories, it's like, oh, who's saying it? And if it's, oh, if David Icke's saying it, okay, I'm all in on David Icke. I love David Icke.
I was just going to say
And
David Icke,
it gets sold on the personality more than on the research itself.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I think, to me, as much as the headlines stuff is just hilarious, and some of it, it goes back and forth between true and false, and there's a gray area. The nuanced part of it is scarier to me than the headlines, because then you start to get into like, the way you kept saying, like, this goes into this. If you see this part of the story, it leads into this research, and you see how there's this web, this giant conspiracy at play, like the MK Ultra can connect to the adrenochrome. You talk about Sidney Gottlieb, the poisoner in chief, and how that relates to Operation Paperclip. That to me is far more terrifying than just a salacious headline, because then you realize you're kind of trapped in this world, that they've created around you of depravity and experimentation. That we could talk about till we're blue in the face, but it's never going to go away, because they're.
Well, I say it's less fun. That's kind of the lead there. Is that it's not as fun, even if it's more interesting, even if it scares you more and it's more true. It's less fun to talk about because now you got to do research.
Yeah. Oh, it's too bad. I love doing that. Unfortunately,
we have a super chat.
Yeah,
totally wild coincidence, but Monsters Inc. is actually about adrenochrome. Pretty wild.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. That one is probably one of the strongest indications, because they're literally collecting fear out of the children. They call it Scream in that particular case. Also, if you look at like Doctor Sleep, which is the sequel to The Shining, they do a similar thing, and they call it Steam instead of Scream. And it's the same thing. They actually target young children, young orphans, that they have to torture this like steam out of them, and it lets them live longer and have like a more youthful experience. Even in Stephen King's, Stephen King's got like 3 or 4 different works that all tie into this. In it, Pennywise describes fear as salting the meat. So there's this like ongoing recurring theme that I think you can tie back to this old like blood libel and like blood magic, but that somehow fear heightens or makes more potent something about innocent children's blood or their meat or their essence. If you scare them enough, then it makes them more valuable, which again is Monsters Inc.
Yeah, it's straight up Monsters Inc. And we know that these evil people like to get away with doing the worst, most nightmarish stuff to children, Epstein stuff, we know all that, but that's just one small facet of a long line of this depravity. So I think, it's unfortunate that this is constantly happening in our world. They're constantly going after kids. I say that, Hillary Clinton's obviously eating children. I can't prove it yet, but I'm pretty sure she is.
I can sneak one more in here,
Please.
kind of on like the political Clinton sort of tangent here, is that another movie that came out the year before Monsters Inc. There was a movie called The Cell that had Jennifer Lopez in it and Vince Vaughn. You remember this movie, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
And there's this very iconic scene when she goes down, and I believe it's either a cow or a horse, and she walks up to this. I'm going to say it's a cow. I can't remember what it is. She walks with this cow, and as soon as she walks up to it, these plates of glass fall from the ceiling, and they basically, cut this cow up in all these different pieces, and they spread themselves across. And now where she can like walk in between these different slices of the cow with its heart still beating and it's still alive. Well, that very particular scene was based on an art installation by a guy named Damien Hirst, who I believe is now like the richest artist out of the UK in history. Like he's made the most money on a lot of this. He came onto the scene after an auction at Christie's, I believe it was, and his very first piece that sold for a significant amount of money was called Adrenochrome Semicarbazone. And the actual collector was a German guy, and it remained somewhat anonymous through the years. But one of the other major collectors of Damien Hirst's work was Tony Podesta, and I believe John Podesta might have had some of his work
No.
as well. And some of those pieces that they collected were these maps of the world with all sorts of like nuclear messaging and biological warfare sort of symbols on like superimposed on top of this map.
Huh.
So here you've got just another really weird connection between adrenochrome by name and the fine art world and the political world.
Well, now that you said it, you reminded me of something. Isn't there some weird connection in the theories, perhaps, between adrenochrome and Pizzagate, since you brought up Podesta?
And Hillary.
Oh, I mean, yeah, absolutely. The whole premise, I think, a large section of Pizzagate was that they were trafficking, large amounts of kids back and forth, and you could probably equate like Pizzagate was just the 2000s version of the Franklin scandal that
Right.
was in the 80s and 90s, and the exact same claims were being made in the 80s and 90s without the word adrenochrome attached to it, but the exact same practices. There was some of the footage from Paul Benassi and Troy Boner, who were the people that alleged all this abuse during the Franklin scandal cases. They actually would state that they would be like poked by hot pokers and scared and tortured, all for these proclivities of like these elites that went all the way up into the White House and midnight tours of the White House and everything that goes along with that. And this was basically the exact same story all over again. It was Franklin scandal, Epstein, Pizzagate. It's kind of the same story, just for a different generation.
Yep. Did you hear that the Pizzagate shooter was shot and killed last year?
I did hear that, yeah.
That was crazy. Like it was the end of last year, I believe, and he was pulled over, and there's some traffic. I don't know. He's pulled over for some driving violation, and they shot him in the car, I believe. I always thought that was weird. Interesting.
North Carolina.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
North Carolina.
Yep.
What was his name?
Oh God. Edgar Madison. Does that sound right?
I think that's right. Yeah, that's bizarre.
Yeah. Edgar
Man,
Madison
well,
Watch.
this was a fun one. Please tell everyone, my friend, where they can find you online. All the places.
The best place is probably paranoidamerican.com. Who knows if I'm going to be up on YouTube this week or not, or on Instagram or not. So yeah, if you go to paranoidamerican.com, you can check out all of my comics and graphic novels and books and occult magazines and everything that I've been working on over the last 15 years plus. It's all 100% original. It's things that I've worked on with actual human beings. There's no AI stuff in there. I do a lot of AI for like commercials and little jingles and stuff, but all of the artwork, everything that you see on there, I've even got sort of custom toys that I've been putting together. I've actually got one here. I've got a Super Predator playset that's got a little light up severed head and a reptilian.
That's
reptilian Hillary
hilarious.
Clinton here, holding a grimoire, and there's like a little jar of adrenochrome on the table here. So
Dude, that's
I'm doing my best to
hilarious.
really take the scariest and most fear sort of soaked conspiracy theories, and again, giving them like the Disney and Lego treatment. Like I want to commoditize and like normalize laughing about some of this stuff instead of just constantly being basked in fear.
And we got to undo all the fear rituals that they're forcing onto our children. And that's a good way to fight it, I think.
Well, ridicule. I think ridicule is probably one of the best weapons that we've got.
100%. That's why they want to censor comics first, like comedians. It's like they're the ones who are always on the front lines of calling out all the insane stuff in our society. And they were the first people that they really went after when it comes to censorship. And it's ridiculous. But, dude, thank you so much for coming on. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it. And and Sound Science as well, like I mentioned. Check that out. I just did that show with you. And, man, I'm spacing on his name, Grey Pilled, right?
Yeah, Jules from Grey Pill Podcast. Yes,
Incredible.
I've got a whole bunch of different
you're
podcasts.
busy.
That's one of my favorite ones. We just talk about music. We don't even have to get into conspiracies or occult.
Yep.
We just listen to music and talk about music, and it's a great time.
So much fun. Well, I appreciate you having me on your shows. I'm so glad you were able to join us tonight. And I hope everyone looks you up and finds everything you do, man. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Later, dude.
Bye.
Man. Oh, the FBI. Oh, the FBI.
Are you just gonna have your kids watch Mary Poppins on repeat?
Not anymore.
No.
Look at me. Look at this. She's a villain this whole time.
She's a.
No, I still, I see that point of view. I've gotten into it with other people about how, she's a bad character, and introduces chaos to the family. And I see those points, but I still believe that it's about bringing the family back together that was broken, and also learning to like have fun as a family, enjoy your imagination, and having the structure too, without being totally insane.